The Messerschmitt Me 262 was unlike anything the world had seen before. Imagine a fighter jet so fast and advanced that it could effortlessly outrun anything the Allies were flying at the time. When you picture the dogfights over Europe in the final years of World War II, the Me 262 stands out as this almost mythical leap forward. A glimpse into a future of aerial warfare that had arrived decades early. Its engines, revolutionary swept wings, and sleek design made it a marvel of engineering. And for pilots lucky enough to fly it, it was a dream machine. They were flying at speeds that left traditional piston engine fighters struggling just to keep up. And its firepower could take down multiple bombers with a single pass. In other words, it wasn't just an upgrade. It was a complete game changer on paper. But here's the catch. All of that technological brilliance came far too late to truly alter the course of the war. By the time the Me 262 reached operational units, the Allies had already established air superiority. Thousands of bombers were relentlessly pounding German cities and factories. And the Luftwaffe was running out of experienced pilots. You could argue that even the best fighter in the world, introduced at the wrong moment, might only have a fleeting effect. The Me 262 is the perfect example of a weapon whose potential was almost limitless, but whose timing and circumstances rendered it largely symbolic rather than decisive. The story of the Me 262 is almost tragic in that sense. The Germans had the knowledge, the design, and even the prototypes in hand. But the combination of political interference, production difficulties, and the sheer chaos of a collapsing front meant that very few of these jets ever saw action in significant numbers. Some of the most remarkable aircraft in history were flown in units so small that they could barely make a dent. Imagine having a jet that could outperform anything in the sky. But only 20 or 30 of them are ready when your enemies are flying hundreds of bombers every day. That mismatch between potential and reality is what keeps historians asking, what could have been? And it wasn't just about speed. The Me 262 forced a rethinking of aerial combat. Its ability to hit and retreat faster than any propeller-driven fighter meant it could change the tactics of dogfighting entirely. Pilots could engage bombers with minimal risk. And theoretically, a fleet of these jets could have seriously disrupted Allied bombing campaigns. But theory and practice are very different things. And the Me 262's late introduction meant the theory remained largely untested on a large scale. What's fascinating, though, is how it foreshadowed the future of aviation. Many post-war jets owe their basic design and ideas to the Me 262. In a sense, Germany gave the world a peek into a future it would never fully experience. A jet-powered air force that could have rewritten the rules if it had been deployed earlier and in greater numbers. The jet's technological edge also highlighted a bitter irony of the war. Germany was ahead in some aspects of innovation. Rockets, jet engines, advanced weapons. But this edge often couldn't be translated into real battlefield advantage. The Me 262 was the epitome of this. On paper, it could have dominated the skies. But logistics, fuel shortages, and the overwhelming numerical advantage of the Allies meant that brilliance alone couldn't win the fight. It's a reminder that technological innovation, no matter how impressive, is only one piece of the puzzle in warfare. Timing, strategy, and production capacity matter just as much, if not more. Flying the Me 262 was a glimpse into a new era. Pilots reported that the sensation of speed and power was unlike anything they had experienced before. Even experienced aces were awed by the jet's performance. But by then, the Luftwaffe was a shadow of its former self. Skilled pilots were dying faster than they could be replaced. And the Allies had adapted to German air defenses. So even the most advanced aircraft could not reverse the tide of war. The Me 262 became a symbol of, what if? A tantalizing example of a weapon that promised to change everything but arrived when the opportunity to do so had already passed. In a way, the Me 262 teaches us about the intersection of innovation and timing. Even the most extraordinary technological breakthroughs can be rendered almost irrelevant if they don't arrive at the right moment. It's a lesson not just for historians or aviation enthusiasts, but for anyone fascinated by the delicate balance between potential and reality. The plane's legacy lives on. Not because it changed the outcome of World War II, but because it showed the world what was possible when engineering leapt ahead of convention. For all its speed, power, and firepower, the Me 262 remains one of the greatest, almost, weapons in history. Brilliant, awe-inspiring, and tragically late. The story of the Me-262 isn't just one of incredible technology. It's also a story of missed opportunities and decisions that changed everything. Or rather, failed to. By the time Germany finally had a working jet fighter, it wasn't just about whether the plane could outperform Allied aircraft. It was about how it was used, how many were built, and how the chaos of war swallowed every advantage before it could matter. What makes the Me-262 so fascinating isn't only that it was the world's first operational jet fighter, but that its potential was undermined not by enemies in the sky, but by strategic missteps on the ground. One of the biggest miscalculations came from Hitler himself. The jet was originally designed as a high-speed interceptor, a fighter that could take out Allied bombers before they could devastate German cities and factories. That would have been the Me-262's ideal role, playing to its strengths of speed, maneuverability, and heavy armament. But Hitler insisted on using it as a bomber, a so-called Blitzbomber, to target enemy positions. He believed it could strike at London or other strategic locations and shift the war's balance. The result was a significant delay in deploying the aircraft in its most effective role. Engineers and pilots argued that it should focus on air superiority missions. But political demands and Hitler's personal whims overrode them. The jet that could have dominated the skies was diverted into a role it wasn't designed for. And the clock kept ticking as Germany's situation grew increasingly desperate. Even after it was finally deployed as a fighter, the Me-262 faced challenges that went far beyond tactical decisions. Production bottlenecks were a constant problem. The plane required advanced materials, highly skilled labor, and engines that were still experimental and prone to failure. Factories were bombed relentlessly, disrupting supply lines and slowing output. By the time Me-262s were ready for combat, only a fraction of the numbers needed for a significant impact were available. It's one thing to have a revolutionary aircraft. It's another to have only a handful of them against hundreds of Allied bombers and fighters. The gap between potential and reality was enormous. And each delay, each shortage, magnified the problem. Fuel shortages were another hidden but critical factor. Germany's war economy was collapsing, and high-quality aviation fuel was in short supply. Pilots had to be selective about when they could fly the Me-262, meaning that even when the planes were ready, they couldn't be used to their full effect. Some missions were cancelled or limited, and pilots risked being grounded entirely if fuel ran out. The combination of too few planes, too little fuel, and the relentless pressure from the Allies made it nearly impossible for the Me-262 to fulfill the promises of its design. And then there was the human factor. Experienced pilots, the ones who could take full advantage of the jet's capabilities, were in short supply. By 1944 and 1945, Germany was losing veteran Luftwaffe pilots at an alarming rate, and the replacements often lacked the training or experience to handle such an advanced aircraft. The Me-262 was not a forgiving plane. It required skill, precision, and nerves of steel. Even a small mistake could be fatal. So while the aircraft itself could have altered air combat, the lack of adequately trained pilots turned it into a weapon that was brilliant in theory but inconsistent in practice. All of these factors combined to turn the Me-262 into what historians often call a too little, too late weapon. Strategically, Germany had engineered a marvel that could have reshaped air warfare. But the timing, production issues, fuel shortages, and flawed deployment meant it never had the chance to change the outcome of the war. The plane's story is a cautionary tale. Technological superiority alone doesn't win battles. How a weapon is used, when it's used, and who is using it matters just as much as the machinery itself. Yet, even with all these setbacks, the Me-262 left an indelible mark on history. Its presence forced the Allies to adapt, accelerated post-war jet development, and influenced the design of countless aircraft in the decades that followed. The missed opportunity is part of its mystique. What if Hitler had listened to his engineers? What if production had been faster? What if Germany had the fuel and pilots to use it effectively? Those questions linger, giving the Me-262 an almost mythical place in history. It's remembered not just as a weapon, but as a glimpse of what might have been. A technology ahead of its time hampered by human error and circumstance. The story of the Me-262 teaches a broader lesson about war, innovation, and leadership. Even the most advanced technology cannot overcome strategic misjudgments. Timing is crucial. Planning is essential. And understanding the strengths of a weapon is just as important as building it. In the case of the Me-262, brilliant engineering met flawed leadership and a collapsing war effort, creating a scenario where a revolutionary fighter jet became a symbol of potential unfulfilled. For all its speed, power, and futuristic design, it serves as a reminder that even the most advanced weapon cannot change history if the strategy around it is flawed. In the end, the Me-262 is remembered as much for the opportunities it missed as for the breakthroughs it represented. It's a story of brilliance delayed, of technology that arrived at the wrong moment, and of the immense consequences of tactical and strategic errors. The jet could have rewritten the skies, could have slowed or even reversed the devastation raining down on Germany, but history didn't allow it. Instead, it remains a legend of what might have been, a reminder that innovation and opportunity must meet at exactly the right time to truly make a difference.